Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. The Mercosur-EU trade deal has been veiled with controversy. On the one hand, it's perceived as the EU diversifying its trade markets, but by those who oppose the deal, it's the backstabbing of European trade and agriculture. Poland has been a strong opposing voice of the deal, and it's not only the Mercosur deal, but also of illegal migration in Europe as well. Can we argue that there's a good reason for it? Warsaw is expecting to see an anti-migration protest later today, organized by the largest opposition party, Law and Justice. To talk about all this, I'm joined by Tomasz Włostowski, Managing Partner at EU Strategies. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's begin with Polish farmers, European farmers, really. They've been long unhappy, and the EU can't seem to figure out how to address their needs. Does the Mercosur deal really provide the assistance that they're looking for?
Look, I think absolutely, and I think you've said that question perfectly. You said the farmers are unhappy, and I think this is really why the farmers are protesting the Mercosur agreement, because the farmers in general, they're unhappy people. I think it is a group of economy in Europe that's benefited greatly from European integration and from European free trade agreements. I mean, as the EU Trade Commissioner said in the Parliament a few months ago, Europe is an agricultural powerhouse. We're a superpower in agriculture. So our agriculture is extremely competitive. We're an exporter of agriculture. So really, farmers have nothing to fear from trade agreements. They're only benefit. However, it is also true, I think, that a number of events in the sort of last few years have, I guess, maybe stroke some fears in them, and the Mercosur agreement is basically sort of an offshoot of those concerns. And I think those two reasons why the farmers are sort of more concerned and why they're easier, I think, to mobilize against the agreement. On the one hand, in our part of Europe, it's the Ukraine agricultural trade. Because Ukraine is a big agricultural exporter. We have seen imports from Ukraine. It's much closer to Europe than Mercosur. We've had Ukrainian exports coming through that part of Europe. So the concerns that the European farmers and Eastern European farmers had about imports, they were much more warranted, I think. So that's sort of the first brick why the farmers are so concerned. The second issue is the Commission proposed a few months ago, the proposal for the new multi-annual financial framework, which basically is the next budget of the European Union for the next 7 years. And there, the Commission proposes quite significant changes to the way the common agricultural policy is being financed. The funds for agriculture are being merged with cohesion funds and so on. So there's, I think, a lot of concern about how the agricultural policy will look like, what it will look like in the years to come. So I think those two agreements have basically set the base for the farmers being quite concerned and easy to mobilize. And then I think on top of that, it's really the fringe right and the far left parties that have been sort of able to use the Mercosur agreement as a boogeyman and stoke up the fears for farmers who are already concerned about other things. And that's why Mercosur agreement shows up in farmers' protests quite a lot. On its face, I think the agreement is not, does not jeopardize the European farming in a major way. Maybe if you're a cattle producer, you have some reason to be concerned, or a poultry producer, but agriculture as such is not going to be hurt by the agreement with Mercosur.
Well, Polish experts say that large supermarket chains dominate food distribution as it is, while traditional markets are vanishing. So if the EU doesn't intervene soon, are we looking at a collapse of family farming across Europe? And also, does the EU care about family farming, especially vis-a-vis the Mercosur deal?
Well, of course it does, I think. And the farming, I mean, I think we have to keep in mind, the farmers are sort of the group that the Commission and the leading party in the European Parliament, so the European People's Party, is very much concerned about. The farmers by population, they're a minor part of European population. We have to keep this in mind. Europe is an agriculture powerhouse, but it's also predominantly a consumer of agriculture. Right? So most Europeans are not producing agriculture. Most Europeans are consumers of agriculture. So if you keep that in mind and you realize we're really a continent of consumers, not of producers of agriculture, then the attention and the money that's going into agriculture is massive, is basically massive. The main party in the European Parliament, Ursula von der Leyen's party, so the head of the European Commission's party, EPP, is very much concerned about the farmers. Anytime the farmers show up in Brussels or before the European Commission or they're protesting, the Commission does something for them. So I don't think it's a fair argument to say that farming is endangered. I think, of course, and it's true, the point you've made about distribution and the chains, the supply chains. I think that's where the biggest problem with agriculture is, because food generally is produced cheaply, but it's sold expensively, and most of the money is being taken by the distribution chain. But that's also true in all trade. So I think the steps that the Commission and the European institutions have taken in recent months, trying to strengthen the role of farmers in the supply chains, I think that's where the answer is. But again, Mercosur as such is just it's an offshoot of the whole debate, because South American countries, although they are agricultural powerhouse, they're also major producers of agriculture. They're very, very far away, and their farming is actually quite complementary to what Europe is producing. So the agreement itself is quite beneficial for farmers and also for Europe as a whole. It's only the small sectors of poultry and beef farming that might have something to be concerned about. But again, those concerns have been addressed in the agreement.
Okay, I want to take a more domestic look. Perhaps you can give us a little bit of insight. We have this soundbite from the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, that I'd like you to comment on. Let's play it, and then I'd like to get your comments after that.
Poland will oppose Mercosur. We want to at least demonstrate that we will not back down when it comes to the interests of Polish agricultural producers. However, we don't currently have the partners necessary to block it. We agreed with the French that since they don't want to form this blocking minority with us, then they should at least prepare a defense mechanism together with us. That is, if Mercosur comes into force and if there are any negative signals regarding the beef market, for example, then the European Commission should immediately implement defense mechanisms such as reinstating tariffs.
So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the Prime Minister has said there, because the understanding is that Poland is not so keen on Mercosur, actually has been one of the leading voices against it. But equally, we also know that Ursula von der Leyen is very much for implementing the Mercosur deal. Can you just give us an idea of where Poland will end up when it comes to the Mercosur deal? Will it essentially support it in the end? We know that Prime Minister Donald Tusk has a strong relationship with Ursula von der Leyen, but equally here we see him saying that it's a no-no for Poland.
Mary, look,
and you also say that Ursula von der Leyen supports farmers whenever we hear anything on the doorsteps of Brussels.
That's absolutely true, and the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen and EPP supports the farmers. That's very clear. But I think this discussion about Mercosur has been basically sort of hijacked by a couple of very sort of peculiar farming interests. Overall, the trade deal with Mercosur is extremely, I think, beneficial to Europe, and we can get into that why. But generally speaking, it's not only about agriculture, and predominantly it's not about agriculture, right? What's not being talked about, for example, for Poland, a lot of our manufacturing exports are sort of subcomponents and parts that are going into, for example, to Germany, which are then being exported to South America. So when we talk about Polish farmers, they're really only a small part, a minor part of people affected by this agreement. Predominantly, Europe exports advanced manufacturing to South America. It's machinery, it's car parts, it's vehicles, those things, pharmaceuticals, chemicals. Those are things that we're exporting to Brazil and to Argentina and to South America. So, and those interests are not being accounted for. I think the Prime Minister here is basically succumbing a little bit to the populist narrative about this agreement being about agriculture, but it's not. So that's the first point. The second point about beef farmers. South Americans are getting 99,000 ton quota to import into the European Union, which is really a fraction. It's 1.5% of European beef consumption. It's nothing. Mercosur produces 15.5 million tons of beef, and they're getting 99,000 tons of a quota. That's nothing. Same thing in poultry. They're getting 180 tons 1,000 tons quota on poultry, when a European market is over 12 million tons of poultry. So when you look at the numbers, the market access that the South Americans are getting in meat is really, really minuscule. I mean, it's immaterial to the market, really, if you think about it. And then on top of that, we have a safeguard system. So basically, if imports start coming in, and if imports start really damaging or injuring our farmers, then there's a safeguard procedure that the Commission can impose to reimpose the duties. So there's a safety mechanism as well. So overall, this discussion about farming, as I said at the beginning, it's really just an offshoot of a general sort of state of emergency, of perceived emergency, more likely, in farming, than about the Mercosur agreement. On the facts, and this is something the Commission has been very clear when it speaks about the agreement, on the facts, there is really not much to be concerned about. But again, the narrative is sort of faster than the facts, so sometimes it's difficult to address those fears.
Well, absolutely. And we also see that essentially, this recent vote in the European Parliament didn't actually go through. So the support for the deal itself is waning. But I was just wondering, would you have said all of that to the farmers in Poland who are actually really struggling? There was a video of a Polish farmer, a pepper farmer that went viral. I'm sure you're familiar with it. He basically brought people in. He invited people in to harvest his peppers because it just wasn't worth it. It makes no sense to actually harvest the peppers, to pay for the harvesting of the peppers and to subsequently sell them, because this is how ridiculously poor the situation is when it comes to Polish farming. There was another situation with plums the other day. Polish farmers are in an absolutely dire situation, and I just wonder whether you would tell them, you're a very small part of the population, you are a very small part of the Polish economy. Mercosur is fine. Would you actually say everything that you just told me a second ago?
Well, look, I do have the benefit of not being the politician, right? So that's number one. But, these are the facts. It's sad to say,
they are the facts, but would you say that to a Polish farmer who is facing the reality of Mercosur kicking in?
Well, look, Mercosur is not a source of pepper imports or plum imports into Europe.
But you know what I mean.
Well, look, I think the facts are that Mercosur has nothing to do with peppers or with plums, right? So the problems that we've discussed already, the problems with the peppers and the plums is not about Mercosur. It's about the distribution chains in Europe, where the farmers are getting paid very little for their produce, which is then being sold expensively by the distribution chain. So this is the issue. It's got nothing to do with Mercosur. Right?
Will Mercosur help them? Will they benefit from Mercosur? Because I think that's what they're worried about.
Well, again, I think it depends on which sector of the farming we're talking about, right? Again, farming is a big sector. I think, for example, actually, if you produce animals, if you're in husbandry, the Mercosur agreement is beneficial to you, because one of the main sources of one of the main commodities that South America exports is animal feed. So the stuff that you're feeding your animals, to some extent, is coming from South America. So in that sense, it is beneficial. But again, it depends on what exactly you are, in which sector of farming you're exactly active.
So essentially, these farmers should re-specialize and adapt their farming to whatever Mercosur will provide in the years to come.
No, Mary, again, it's not about Mercosur, right? The pepper farmer or the plum farmer, Mercosur is not going to change his market situation. Yes, no, but it's an important distinction. The Mercosur agreement is not going to affect the situation, right? It's not going to affect the situation. But it is going to affect the situation of about 1 million of European companies that are exporting manufactured products to South America. And again, at what cost does it come? We're opening our market to some little of agriculture imports from South America, which again are not going to touch the pepper farmer or the plum farmer. Okay. Now, the problems that they have, again, is somewhere else, but not with South America.
Okay, so much more that we can talk about. I'm sure we will continue as this issue develops. Tomasz Włostowski, Managing Partner at EU Strategies. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And this wraps up this edition of World Talks. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.